Thanks, Anil, and thanks, Peter. It's possible that many of you here haven't heard about DSM or don't know enough about DSM, so maybe just a brief introduction about DSM. DSM is more than a 100-years-old company. In fact, it's called Royal DSM because it has a royal decree from the King and Queen of Netherlands. It's based in Netherlands. It is the largest and the most leading company in nutrition. So we make the most comprehensive range of nutrition ingredients, all kinds of vitamins and stuff. And also have leading positions in advanced materials and life sciences like engineering, plastics, resins, as well as antibiotics and statins. Yeah? Underpinning everything we do, obviously, is our core commitment to sustainability, which is actually well evidenced by the fact that our CEO, Vaike Sabisma, is one of the 5 CEOs and 5 heads of governments worldwide trying to advocate the whole COP21 Paris event. We also have a strong commitment to renewable energy, whether it's in solar. We make finishes and coatings which improve the productivity by 6 to 7%, and that's a lot. That saves a lot of money. Is when you spend $1 billion, you save 7% of that. And we also we just commissioned our largest plant to make cellulosic ethanol in the United States from corn. And in India, for example, we also have an experimental biogas plant in Ludhiana where we process 200 tons of cow dung to produce 1 megawatt of power. And that's probably the most scaled biogas plant in India. The Indian business reflects all these businesses. It's about 900 people here, about 3,000 crores in turnover. Yeah. So that's sort of a quick introduction to DSM. At the outset, of course, I don't know, where is Seema? I would like to congratulate her and her team for the outstanding work that they have done over these last 10 years. I think they need an applause, please. Thank you. And so this is the right stage, therefore, to look at what the next 10 years ought to be. I would sort of address it in 2 dimensions. Anil, our chairperson, said that we should be very practical, so I'll try and keep this as practical as we can get. The one dimension I want to take is most of us come from businesses with manufacturing activities and customers and stuff. So what can we do within our business and over the next 10 years? And secondly, of course, from what Peter just introduced, what can we do more on a societal front outside our business? So let me take what is it that we can do within our business. As Mr. Deveshwar said yesterday, all of us already have a significant enlightened self-interest about why sustainability. The problem we really struggle with is what and how to do. What is it that we do? Thank you. What is it that we do, and how do we do it? Now, in this context, obviously, if you look around, some of us, as Seema described yesterday, some of us are gallopers. Yeah? Some of us are walkers. Some of us just hit the road, and some of us are just talkers. Yeah? Now, the challenge for the next 10 years is to make sure that all of us become gallopers. And for that, I would suggest a framework. The basic framework obviously starts from examining our business value proposition for each one of us and see where exactly are the burning platforms. For example, the 2 burning platforms which Mr. Deveshwar highlighted yesterday, one around fossil fuels and one around food preservation. Now, if you look at that, if you take fossil fuels, transportation is one of the key items. Anil just mentioned about that. But there's only so much you can do about improving the efficiency. What are the other things which you can do? For example, in DSM's engineering plastics business, we can replace steel with plastics. So every kilo of weight which we reduce in the car, it's its carbon footprint improves significantly, not just in terms of the car itself, because plastics have less of a carbon footprint than steel, but also in terms of the operability of the car. Similarly, if you look at food preservation, for example, we make thermoplastic elastomers, which are breathable, which make sure that the environment inside the packaging has the right combination of moisture, carbon dioxide, and oxygen to keep the food fresh. Now, these are burning platforms which will emerge. The second step, of course, is to understand what are the opportunities around that and what can we do. And at what point does it start to tip? When will the cold chains actually come about? When these things start to happen? And secondly, when will people really become aware that really sustainability in terms of carbon emissions is really true and important in making the choice of the car they want to buy? So these are real practical examples I'm sharing with you. Each of your businesses will have your own agendas, and out of this obviously comes a sense of the business case. And finally, how do we do that? My point here is, it is not that each of us has to do these things by ourselves. We can collaborate. I'll give you another example. DSM invented a fiber called Dyneema, which is 15 times stronger than steel. Now we work with Tata Trust and the Fisheries Department and Garware and the local communities in Andhra Pradesh and Gujarat to develop fishing nets which don't use steel for pulling, and develop fishing nets which are 15 times stronger. Now what it does, it reduces the weight, therefore reduces the fuel consumption, it increases the size of the catch, it is better for the ecology, it is low maintenance, it's longer life, it's faster catching and bigger catching. So everything is good news here. But this is possible only if we work this through together. So that's another point I want to make. So when you try and find solutions, don't imagine that you need to do it by yourself. Find ways of doing it together. And that's where I think the Center for Excellence in Sustainable Development of CII can make a big difference in bringing partners together and collaborating. So this is probably the direction in which we have to drive for excellence internally, in terms of lifting, making sure that the talkers and the people who just hit the road and the walkers actually keep pace with the gallopers. Yep. So with that behind, let me try and shift it to what can be outside us. And this is where I probably want to build on what Peter said. We all know about the triple bottom line, right? The planet, the profit, the people. Now really, when you look around, what really impacts the triple bottom line? My submission is the importance of each element of this triple bottom line is driven by how much it affects each other. That is, if you do something and that affects me, then I'm concerned it's a larger problem and it's a global problem. If I do something which affects you, likewise. But if you do something which doesn't seem to affect me, or if I do something which doesn't seem to affect you, then it is less likely to be a global problem, or a larger problem, or even a national problem. Now let me explain what I mean by, let's take each one of these dimensions. Let's take profits, the financial one. Markets open up, trade opens up, resource movements open up, and suddenly the world becomes, the whole financial world becomes a global governance issue, managed globally. Something happens in China and our stock markets go down. The Federal Reserve has a bigger impact on us than RBI. So really, when somebody does something and somebody else gets affected, it's a global problem. Let's take planet. Peter just explained, it doesn't matter if we, as Mr. Deveshwar highlighted yesterday, over the last 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, contributed only 3% of the total greenhouse gases up there. But everything which we do now makes a difference to the world. And what I do here in Delhi will not only affect Delhi, all the pollution index, which Anil talked about, what will affect the world? It will affect Europe, it will affect Africa, it will affect America. So therefore, this becomes a global issue, and that is how organizations like the conference like the COP21 become very relevant. Well, let me come to the third one, which is have a serious concern. It's about the people. Now, what happens in the case of people? What happens in the case of society? If something I do doesn't affect you, if something you do doesn't affect me, it doesn't make a difference. Now, why is it that we don't believe the people agenda to be an equally important global agenda? Let's take the case of malnutrition. What is malnutrition? Malnutrition is if you don't get enough to eat, or if you're not eating enough of the right stuff, or whatever you eat doesn't make a difference to you because your system is not capable of absorbing it. Now, a consequence of malnutrition is that 1 out of 3 children who die below the age of 5 die because of malnutrition. Get this statistics right. 1 out of 3 children who die below the age of 5 die because of malnutrition. And this means globally 2.6 million children die because of malnutrition. Right? And out of this 2.6 million people, given the youth and the population size of India, roughly 1 million children die because of malnutrition. Anil talked about Delhi and the environmental impact. You scale it down and just take a size of the population equal to Delhi. It may not be a Delhi statistic. But 20,000 children die in Delhi because of malnutrition. That means 50 children die every day because of malnutrition, but we still worry about things which are not so serious. How does this happen? How do we let these kind of deaths take place across the world, across India, and still don't feel that this is one of the most paramount points to be considered? Now, why am I highlighting this? If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals which are going to be signed up, underpinning virtually every one of those goals is a healthy population. Malnutrition not only kills, but malnutrition leads to 1 out of 3 people in India are stunted, which means they don't have the height. A similar proportion of people are wasted, which means they have the height and they don't have the weight. And a smaller proportion are obese, which means they somehow cross the bridge of early years, but once they get to older age, their body doesn't know how to cope when they are able to eat, and so they put on weight and they become obese. Now, it is well known that malnutrition causes 2 to 3% loss of GDP for virtually every population. Can you imagine India's 2 to 3% of GDP is because of malnutrition? It's also proven that for every dollar you invest in malnutrition, you get a return of $20 to $30 because any person who is affected by malnutrition is likely to be 20% less productive. Now, this is a major problem. And if we don't address this, how are we going to address the Sustainable Development Goals? Not a chance, because it underpins most of those goals. Can we do this? Of course we can do this. Here's my colleague on the dais, Mukundan, his company Tata Chemicals addressed the whole issue of brain and cognition with iodine in salt. Didn't we solve it? Didn't we solve polio with the Pulse Polio program? So we have successful examples. So my sort of submission is 2. One is that malnutrition like this, which really affects countries like India, doesn't get the same kind of global attention and priority it deserves, because if somebody dies here, probably it doesn't affect somebody else. It must be addressed. That's one. And secondly, this is an area where all of us as companies, and we have huge CSR funds, and we have good intentions and everything of solving these problems. Let's collaborate and make sure that in the next 10 years, as one of the 3 P's of the triple bottom line of sustainability, the people agenda is kept on top, and malnutrition is addressed as a program sponsored by this center. Thank you.